with me over the last 4 weeks to show you what I've been stocking up on during the 80% off sale at the grocery store, I thought this week it would be fun to give you a full pantry tour. So today I want to show you what we have in our refrigerator, in our kitchen cupboards, in our grocery stockpile area, our freezer, and also all of the toiletries that we keep stocked in the bathrooms. So just to give you a little background, I have actually been building a pantry or grocery stockpile since I was 18. So I was the college kid who was going to the grocery store with coupons and loading up on things when there were clearance sales. And you can just ask my dad, because the first year of college when he came to move me back home for the summer, he was really frustrated because I had stocked up on these big 8-packs of paper towels. I think I probably had 2 8-packs. So for him to be like trying to fill the car, he just couldn't understand why you had to like squish these huge packages of paper towels in as well. But to me, they were 75 cents an 8-pack, and I wasn't gonna pass that up. So I have a lot of experience doing this. We were in our last house for 20 years. So we were really at a point where we had a very well-established stockpile, both of store goods and homemade things. And we were really very much in the maintenance mode of just replenishing when there's a good sale or when I was working on processing some fruits or vegetables, that kind of thing. So moving to France meant giving up our stockpile. And starting over again is no small feat. So it is not something that you, if you're trying to save money, it's definitely not something you go to the grocery store and replace all at once. So I have gradually been working on building up reserves again when I'm catching sales, when I have time to make some of the things that we like to keep on hand. And so it's very much a work in progress. And I will mention too that moving here also meant giving up most of the kitchen equipment that we used, to can, to dehydrate, all of those sorts of things. So we are still in the building phase with all of that as well. So I have replaced a few kitchen appliances, but we still have a lot to work on. So I want to show you where we're at, and I will kind of throughout this tell you like what we normally would have versus what we have now and what we're working towards. Okay, so let's start with the refrigerator. Okay, so unless you go out of your way to buy an American style fridge, in France, most refrigerators are sort of what we would consider apartment size in the US. So this is our refrigerator, and hopefully you can get some perspective and see that it is really pretty small. So initially I thought this was going to be something that we would want to replace eventually, but I have actually come to really like having this smaller refrigerator, and I have to say it really does surprise me. So what I'm finding having a smaller refrigerator is that it's a lot easier to keep it organized. We pretty much put the same types of things on the same shelves every week. So we know where things are when we're looking for something. We can very easily see when we're out of anything. But more to the point, because it's not so big, we just simply don't have the kind of food waste that I think is really common in the US. We see what we have, we remember to use it up, and we're not able to buy a ridiculous amount of stuff. So it pretty much takes care of itself and avoids all that food waste. So the one thing I'm finding a little challenging, the compartment on the door where we store our condiments and drinks is a lot smaller. It's not as deep as it would be in the US. And so that means that maybe like in the US you would be inclined to buy the largest size of something because that was the cheapest price, or the cheapest way to go. Here, I'm honestly more inclined to buy small things because I know they're going to fit our compartments and not be annoying. So for example, in the beginning, I bought these really big American size things of ketchup, and they're super annoying in the fridge because if you open or close the door too fast, they want to jump out like this. So they usually all end up with broken lids. So that's something I don't do anymore. I showed you the other day that I had bought a small mayonnaise, and that's because that's what fits here. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense to buy smaller stuff here as well because there are not all the preservatives and things that we are used to dealing with in the US. So stuff just simply doesn't last as long. it goes off quicker. And I honestly think that is also a good thing. I would much rather not have all that stuff in our food. So there is not the option of buying gallons of milk. So here, milk is in liters. So on a normal week, we go through 4 liters, and that's what fits on my shelf. So that's fine. And then we usually buy the orange juice in liters as well, because I don't have it this way this week, but normally there would be 1 shelf for milk and 1 for orange juice, and that would work really well for us. Also just getting used to the different size containers. This is heavy cream, but it's in a much smaller container than we would normally have in the US. And this, just if you're wondering what this is fresh buttermilk. So in our fridge, we have our condiments in the door. And then I also try to normally have 6 packages of butter, because I do a lot of recipe development, and that just makes sure I have what I need on hand. I'm still adjusting to lemon juice. The containers here are the little small ones, which is definitely an option in the US. That's how most people probably buy it. But I was actually buying big commercial size bottles because I used a lot of it. So I now run through these like 1 or 2 recipes. So I haven't quite figured that out yet. Okay, so at the moment we have quite a bit more milk than usual, and that's just because I've been doing a lot of recipe work lately. And then fridge is then stocked with a lot of our homemade stuff. So these are the refrigerator radish pickles that I made with you guys a few weeks back. Mr. Huff loves his carrots. Instead of yogurt's huge here in France, but instead of purchasing yogurt, we actually buy fromage blanc, which is technically a cheese rather than a yogurt product. So this is, in taste and texture, is like the equivalent of a Greek yogurt. We really, really like it. And you can see it's really healthy for you. It's got a Nutri-Score. So we'll often have that for breakfast with a little dollop of jam stirred into it. Okay, so fridge is really just things that we are actively using for the most part. So leftovers, things I'm working on. I've got some lemon juice that I've got saved for a project. I've just made some pimento cheese. Oh, this is cool. So in France, let me pull this out and I'll show you on the counter. Okay, so in France, the lunch meat I showed you the other week, you buy it in packages by how many slices you want, 2, 4, or 8 slices. The packages are generally not reclosable. So after you open one, it kind of becomes problematic as to where you're going to put it. But they make these storage containers. If you can see, it's multi-tiered. So I've got 1 tier has chorizo, we've got ham in here, and normally I would have another tier with sliced cheese that we're just out at the moment. So that is a really important part of our fridge, since we don't have the option of resealing the containers. And I think probably because French people tend to shop a lot more frequently for groceries, the idea is that you're opening the package and using it up all the way, or all at once. And so we don't always do that, and that solves that problem. So here's my nice assortment of cheese. Ranch dressing, this is my homemade buttermilk ranch dressing. I can share that recipe with you sometime if you're interested. We've got a chicken that we were able to get reduced yesterday, reduced price. So we'll probably have that for lunch today. And then I am planning on freezing the bones until I have time to make broth, because I do make all my own broths. So this top shelf is generally things that we have open that we're trying to eat through. But you can see not a ton of stuff in the fridge. And it's great because we really are not wasting foods. Okay, so let me turn around here and I will show you what we keep in the kitchen island. So we do have a decent number, I guess, of kitchen cabinets. However, they are all kitchen equipment with the exception of the kitchen island. So there's not a dedicated pantry in the kitchen like we would have in the US, at least not in this house. So that was a little bit of a challenge to figure out where I was going to store stuff. So on this side here, facing the refrigerator, we have in the bottom just our open stacks. So it's chips. Sometimes it might be cookies if I haven't been baking something, dried fruits, nuts, that sort of thing. Then this shelf is any of our open containers of things like peanut butter or Nutella, speculoos, those sorts of things, syrups. And then over here, this is kind of my new thing I'm trying now. I have some of my baking ingredients. So I've got packages of raisins and chestnut cream and chocolate chips. I've got my tapioca pearls, sanding sugar, instant tapioca. Normally, if this was my kitchen back in the US, I would also have instant clear gel for making pies and puddings and things. So next time I'm in the US, I will be buying some of that to restock. And then I have got, this bin is all of the colored sugars. I showed you at Christmas how I make those. And then just cupcake wrappers. So, and this area down here is open packages of pasta and rice. It's also where we keep our tortillas. So we actually get quite a bit of food in this little kitchen island. All right, now let's pop around to the other side and I will show you what I've got over there. So this is really the part of the kitchen that I access a billion times a day. So this area has most of my baking supplies as well as my spices. And it was quite an adventure restocking this stuff when I first got here because before I could restock, I had to figure out what the French equivalent was to the things I was used to using in the US, if there was an equivalent. And there's been a little bit of like experimenting to find what works for us. So our salt I have to keep in a container because it's pretty high humidity here, and if I didn't do that, it would be a brick all the time. So I keep that in a container. And then if you're just curious about ways to store different products, so something I've found that I really love, I think they're Cambro is the brand, these like restaurant grade containers. They're fantastic for storing baking supplies. If you do a lot of baking and you keep a lot of supplies on hand, they're just wonderful because they're very easy to take the lids off. And because the containers are pretty wide, it's really easy to measure without getting all the powders all over the counter, which always used to drive me nuts. So that's what that is. And you may see that I've labeled everything with both the name in English and the name in French. So not only does that help everybody learn the names for everything, but if somebody other than me is needing to go replace something, they know at a glance what they're looking for at the grocery store. Okay, so all-purpose flour and salt. And back here I have our pizza flour. Mr. Huff likes to make homemade pizza, so he'll probably do that with you guys sometime soon. And then I store one jar that I'm currently working on of my homemade vanilla, and the rest is in my grocery stockpile, which I'll show you later. And then I showed you these last week. This is the French equivalent of baking powder. It works a little different than the stuff in the US, and it comes in individual little packets. So there are 5 individual packets in this one little thing that you buy. So they have 3, let's see, they have a tablespoon, I think, is that right? A tablespoon in each one. So sometimes they'll use the whole thing in a recipe. Sometimes I'll have recipes that only use 2, so I always have a container of an open package that I'm working through. Okay, and then my baking soda as well. So just normal pantry things. This bin here, it says it's chocolate. I need to relabel that. Is all of my sweeteners. So I've got honey, sugar cubes. Those are really common in France for like hot drinks. Just ones that we've ended up with from hotels or whatever that we don't want to waste. And there's a little bit of agave. So just sweeteners in that bin. And then over here, here's more of those. I think they're Cambro. I think that's the right brand. Yeah, that's what it says. Okay, just the smaller size of those Cambros. I love them also because they have deep lids, so they stack beautifully. They don't slide and fall over. So I have one for brown sugar, one for cocoa powder. That was game changing to store my cocoa in one of these, because it would just, cocoa is like one of those peeve things where it just gets everywhere when you try to measure it. And now it doesn't, because I have it in that. Powdered sugar, and this bottom one is cornstarch. And then I plan to get a few more of them next time somebody visits us from the US, maybe. This one is popcorn, and then cornmeal. So eventually I will hopefully have one of those green containers for that guy. All right, and then up here this is all stuff for drinks. In France, it's very common to make flavored waters or sodas, make your own sodas. And these are all flavored syrups for doing that. So this is a pear. You can tell we like this one. That's a lemon. They're fun. Let's see. This is a blueberry, blackberry. I got this one at a chateau we visited. This is a locally made hibiscus syrup. And then there's one for mint. So we keep all of those here because we use them with our soda stream. And I can show you that sometime as well, because I think that's pretty interesting. Okay, so this is all tea. So these are all loose teas. We inherited quite a bit of loose teas with the house because the previous owners were British. And then some of this is ours as well. And then this is all tea bags. So I don't really drink tea, my girls do, and I like to have it on hand for them, or if we have other guests who drink tea. Okay, and then this is a little more of my baking stuff. And so I have food coloring and sprinkles basically in this container. So, and I have to say, I really do prefer US sprinkles. I probably shouldn't. I think the reasons I like them is because the colors are more vibrant, which is, I'm sure, because they're not using good things. But these are a couple French ones. One of the things I've noticed is they are not heat safe, the French sprinkles. So that's problematic if you're having to bake something with them in it. Okay, and then this is part of my spice collection. Now, I absolutely love spices. I love to make my own blends. I just used a ton of spices. So this is a small part of my overall spice setup, and I'll show you that. So I have these little pull-out guys, which I really like, that I got a few years ago. I'm trying to remember. It says they are, let's see, Made Smart, looks like is the brand. I got those in the US. I can link some of this stuff if you're interested. They work really well. So this one is all of my warming spices, so like clove, nutmeg, cinnamon, all that kind of stuff, allspice. And then this next caddy is all like spices that add heat. So it's things like cumin and pepper and paprika and all that kind of stuff. And then this next one is all of my herbs. So basil and thyme and sage and parsley and all those types of things. This next one is a bit of a spillover. So I've got coriander, cream of tartar. By the way, it's not the easiest stuff to get in France. You either get it from a pharmacy, like you have to go ask the pharmacist for it, or I was able to order it on Amazon, but you don't find it in the grocery store. So that one was hard-earned. And then I really try to only use homemade broth, but I have, since coming here until I get my stash built back up, I have bought some bouillon cubes. Really hate using them. I'm just gonna be real, I don't like them. I don't like all the sodium and junk. And then I've got all my extracts back here. So almond extract, maple, the ones that I don't make myself basically are in that rack. Okay, so that's pretty well this cabinet. And let me show you the next area of my spices. So when we bought the house, it had a built-in spice rack on the wall. And currently what I have in here are my homemade spice blends. So that any of these up here are ones that I make myself. So fin herb and poultry seasoning, apple pie spice, pumpkin pie spice, forest spice, herb de Provence. I make my own chili powder and fajita seasoning and taco seasoning, as well as Italian. And then up here, I've got bouquet garni, gingerbread spice, and mulling spice. So these are all ones that I make myself and that I have shared the recipe for on the website. So I can include a link if you're interested to where all of my spice recipes are, if you want to try making any of those. So right now that rack is not big enough to hold my full spice collection. So Mr. Huff and I have been talking about building a big custom spice rack to kind of take over this whole space here between the stove and the window. So once we do that, I would like to get all of the spices that I just showed you in the cabinet up on the wall, because right now I have a lot of my spices in these little jelly jars, these little 1/4 pint, and unfortunately they don't stack well. So they're all the time getting knocked over and hitting the tile floor when I'm trying to find something. So once we get to that project, we will definitely share that with you, because that will be huge for me. All right, so that's all the food that we store in the kitchen, I think, except for my sugar is here next to the island. My granulated sugar is in a big 5-gallon bucket with one of those gamma lids, which I love because it comes on and off easily. And I try to usually keep about 25 pounds of sugar on hand at a time, just because I'm all the time testing recipes. Okay, and then in terms of fresh foods, we always have plenty of fruits here in this rack. And then we just keep our eggs out on the counter here. That's how they're at the store. They're not refrigerated at all in France. And just some overflow of things that we're making and using right now. This is my homemade mulling syrup we've been enjoying during the winter. And my giant bag of bay leaves off of our tree. And then, just since we're over here, this is a bin of stuff that I have bought, that I have set aside for recipes that I'm currently working on, so that Mr. Huff or whoever else is here knows that those are not foods that they can get into at the moment. Okay, so that's the kitchen. Now let me go take you to our grocery stockpile. All right, so when we bought the house, I have to admit, I was a little stumped as to where I should put my grocery stockpile. In our old house, we had it in our basement, which worked really well for us. But our cellar here is just a little too damp for me to think that was a good idea. So then I landed on what I think is the perfect solution. So here's the staircase that I've shown you before. And on the left side, there's this utility closet that's basically there to house the hot water heater. So there's the hot water heater in the back corner, and it kind of sits down on its own little level. So this is actually a really good, dry, safe place to put our food, and it's actually not too far from the kitchen. So now, one thing I haven't talked about yet is stockpiling now is different, and we're having to kind of reevaluate what we want to store versus before and in the US and having an established stockpile. So, you know, when we were in the US, we were a family of 4. Now our girls are adults, and it's just Aaron and I. So we don't necessarily need to stock things in the same quantities that we did before. Although, because I do a lot of recipe work, there are things that I need to stock in big amounts. And also, I still need to build in for having enough stuff to support having guests or when the kids are home or that sort of thing. So, still something we're working on and figuring out. But here's what we're stocking at the moment. So, as I said, we've been here 16 months now, and really for the first year, we were so focused on paperwork that I didn't have the headspace to be building the stockpile. So it's only more recently that I've gotten back to doing this. And almost everything that I'm about to show you was purchased either 70 or 80% off, because the grocery stores run these fantastic 6-week sales cycles where they'll have a different category every week. And I've shown you 4 of the last 6 weeks that they had a sale. And so we are able to really stock up on things at unbelievable prices. So by having a stockpile, by building this out as I am, we're getting to a point where I'm not going to need to buy any of these things until they come back around on sale again. So that is a huge win on our grocery budget. We can keep ourselves very well stocked in food without having to spend hardly anything at the grocery store. All right, so let me show you what we're storing now. So I guess I should mention too, these shelves were not here. So these Aaron built for me. We bought those on Amazon, and we were able to really utilize just about every inch of space in this closet all the way up to the ceiling, which is fantastic. Okay, so let me show you what we're storing. So we've got oils. We have olive oil, and I think most of this is just other cooking oils. And then all of our condiments are kind of in this area. And you'll see here's a much smaller bottle of ketchup. I have learned my lesson on the size. So we have ketchup and mayonnaise, tartar sauce. And I'm trying, and I should mention too, like in the past, I would have stored a lot more of this stuff. And now I am really content to have one in reserve. I think that's plenty sufficient for us. So that's more or less what I have done here. And now here are like the different condiments that I would use to make dinners. So chili sauce, teriyaki, soy sauce. I've got quite a stash of lemon juice because, as I said, the bottles are small and I go through them rapidly. So it makes sense for me to have a lot of that. A lot of these condiments were not easy to source. So the grocery stores are a bit different in France in that I feel like if you go to a US grocery store, you have like 50 choices for every item, and it's a little overwhelming, frankly. I can't say that I like that. But in France, it's not even a given that every grocery store is going to store or sell every product. So I have specific stores I have to go to get certain things. So it did take me a little while to round up all of my condiments again. And I guess I forgot to show you that in the kitchen. We can look at that in a bit. Okay, so mayonnaise. So I will note that mayonnaise in France has Dijon mustard in it, which is great for most things, but it's maybe not great if you're trying to make an American recipe because it's adding a flavor that may not work. So I did this week buy some, you can see, American style mayonnaise. So I haven't tasted this yet. We'll see. But I figured that would be good to have on hand for when I'm working on something that does not need to have mustard in it. Okay, so peanut butter, I mentioned, is not the cheapest here, so I only buy that when it's on sale. We got a stash of coffee for Mr. Huff. I don't drink coffee or tea. And then there was a week, a while back, hopefully I can move this without knocking it over, when Nutella was on sale for 80% off. So I have a big row of Nutella. So I will probably have to come up with some uses for that at some point. And then normally I would make all of my own jellies. I have not gotten back to that yet, mainly because I like to make freezer jams and I just don't have the space in my freezer at this point. So I do have a row of jams. Luckily they're really affordable here, so that's great. Honey, which you saw me get 80% off the other day. Applesauce. This is all sugar-free applesauce. Mr. Huff or the girls will eat it, but mostly I have it for baking. And then I have recently restocked all of my baking stuff. So I have sweetened condensed milk and evaporated milk. And I was really happy to see the sweetened condensed milk cans are the same size as in the US. So that makes it easy for recipes. And then I have some coconut milk through this area, mostly for like dinner recipes. 1 box of cocoa powder. I really wish I had gotten more of this when I had the chance because it was kind of a seasonal thing. And then you saw last week when I got all of the powdered milks in that 80% off sale. So that was great. And then let's see what else is on the shelf. We don't eat cereal at all now that we're in France. So that's a big meal change for us. But I do have one box of corn flakes for some special family recipes that we make. And then I've recently stocked a thing of ice cream cones because I have tons of ice cream recipes that I need to share with you guys this year. So that's for that. Okay, so this next shelf is mostly tomato products and beans. Now, this is stuff that I have that I'm buying at the grocery store right now. It will not be stuff that I buy long term, and that's because it's stuff that I generally like to make myself. And just as you'll see in a bit, I do not have the space in the freezer yet to do these things. All right, so we have tomato sauce, salsa, peeled tomatoes, pizza sauce. We actually make our own pizza sauce, but for now it's just convenient to have it on the shelf. Tomato paste, pureed tomatoes, whole tomatoes. I've got a couple things of chorizo. We like to roast a tray of root veggies with that and have that for dinner, and that's really tasty. Then I have some dried beans because I'm trying to get back to being able to do all of our own. It was really incredibly difficult for me to find black beans. They don't seem to have them in cans, and I've only found one store that had them dried like this. And that's been true for pinto beans too. I'm sure somebody will sell them and I'll find them eventually. But my daughter actually brought them from Spain for me for Christmas. Lentils, red lentils are just as easy to get here as they were in the US. And then I've got some corn for specific recipes, and those are like the fried onions that go on top of like green bean casserole. And then I have kidney beans and chickpeas and white beans. And as I said, over time, this shelf will get emptied out because I will start making all this stuff again. Okay, down here, I've got a lot of baking supplies. So I've got cornstarch, extra bags of flour, baking soda. These are all brown sugar. We found some containers that they fit in really well, so that's how we're storing them on this shelf so they don't get damp or anything. Powdered sugar and oatmeal. Now, I do want to mention, I do not like to store grains out on shelves like this because I think it's a risk for getting pantry moths. So normally these things would be in my freezer, and like I said, I don't have the space right now. So they're temporarily here, and I'm working to get everything in airtight containers so that if something were to have bugs, it would not spread through all of our stash. So you'll see there are a few things like cornstarch and oatmeal that I have not yet gotten into airtight containers. So every week I'm looking for that at thrift stores. And if and when I get a little bit of space in my freezer, I will probably put those items in there for at least 48 hours just to kill any larvae or whatever might be in the food before putting it back on the shelf. So definitely a work in progress. All right, so this area is pastas. Now, I don't store nearly as much as I used to, and mainly that's because fresh pasta is actually really affordable in France, and so that's my preference. We usually buy like one package of fresh pasta a week. And so this is really just here for specific recipes or just so we have some on hand if maybe we're sicker and we're not able to get to the grocery store or whatever. So I've got some spaghetti, some alphabet pasta for an upcoming recipe I'll be sharing, rice noodles to make pad thai. I think there's some bow ties, just a few things. And then this is a project that you and I did together. So I've shown you on weeks when I'm able to get the big bags of bread for €1.50. I've made breadcrumbs. So there's plain, there's Italian, and then behind that I have one of panko. So all the stuff that I have made. And then the other week when we got that big bag of bread and Aaron showed you he was cubing it. So we cubed all of that bread and then I've dried it in the oven. So this is really great for us. You see I have quite a bit now because we can either quickly turn those into croutons if we need them for like a salad, or if I start using through my stash of any of these breadcrumbs here, I can quickly grind them down, add seasoning, do whatever I need to create the type of breadcrumbs that I need. So this has them in a state that just gives us a lot of options. So I'm very happy to have that done, and that's definitely an example of the type of things that are homemade that we like to have on hand in our stockpile or our pantry. So it's not all store-bought stuff. Okay, and the bottom shelf here is my collection of cleaning supplies. So a big thing of vinegar, and then just kitchen, bathroom, all-purpose cleaners. Now, luckily, there's a discount store here called Action, or if you were pronouncing it in English, it would be Action. And they have a really great line of cleaners with natural ingredients that I feel good about using, and these are very, very affordable. I think they're like €1.50 a bottle, guys. They're really a cheap deal. So I stock up on those. I try to have at least 2 or 3 bottles extra on the shelf at all times. And then back here on that same shelf, I have filters for our Brita. That same store, Action, has a super good deal on the filters. Like, these are astronomical at the grocery store. I think they're like $20 or more. This 2-pack is only $6 at Action, and so they're great. They are a great deal, and I try to have some of those on hand at all times so we can switch them out monthly. And then I've got dishwasher tabs, and on a previous sales cycle they had a deal on these, and I think they were 70% off, maybe, or they might have been 80, but I think 70. So it makes me grouchy to buy stuff like that, so because they're so expensive typically, whether it's here or the US. So these sales are fantastic. Now, I showed you 4 out of the 6 weeks of the current sales cycle. So I didn't show you the first 2 weeks because we were still on Christmas break. But one of the weeks was cleaning supplies, and it could be pretty much any cleaning supply. So I looked online at everything that was included, and I saw that it even included the beneficial bacteria that we add to our septic every week just to keep everything working well. And so I went ahead and stocked up on that, and I think I ended up calculating I had like more than a 2-year supply with me doing a weekly treatment. So that was just a really awesome time for me to stock up on that stuff, and I think I ended up paying like $5 maybe for like a 2.5 year supply. So that was a great deal. Okay, let me get back up here and I will show you what is on the other shelf. Now, I think when you're talking about somebody's frugal stockpile, there are certainly the food and toiletries and those types of things, but there's also all the equipment that goes into making all of the homemade stuff, and that's a lot of what is on this other shelf in this closet. So I have on this top shelf, these bins are full of all of my silicone molds. So the first one is like all of my cube molds for making, like if I were to be freezing leftover tomato paste, or the other day I had extra pimentos, things I couldn't use the whole container. I would freeze them in a cube and then they would go in the freezer. So that's what this is for. This is all of my chocolate like candy molds and popsicle molds because we make a lot of that stuff ourselves. And then these are my specialty molds. So the blue one in the front is for making meatballs for the freezer. So it's really nice having them in here and close to the kitchen so that I can grab them whenever I need to. Let's see, we don't use a lot of paper towels because we tend to use rags, but we do keep some rolls. So there's paper towels up here, and then our really big heavy duty first aid kit in this closet. Okay, and then this closet this is all of the appliances that I have managed to accumulate so far. So this is like a multi-cooker. It's sort of like a crock pot, but maybe has some more bells and whistles. I don't think there's anything like it in the US. So I've used it a couple times. It's really nice. I need to get used to using it more. And then occasionally use stuff in here. So this is Mr. Huff's fry cutter. The first stand-in food processor we bought when we first got here before we finally found our nice one. And then I have 3 fondue pots so that we can do fondue when we have guests. And then What else do we have? This shelf has my spice grinders. I told you I love spices. So I have 3. I have one for peppers that's dedicated just to peppers, one that's dedicated to citrus, and one for all the herby stuff. And that way they don't kind of cross-contaminate flavors. Okay, so behind it I have all of my extracts that are currently brewing. So I showed you last week how to make orange and lemon extract. They're back there. And I usually have at least 3 or 4 reserve jars of vanilla because I go through it pretty quickly. So those are all back there. And then this is all of my bulk spices. So I cannot stand buying the little tiny jars of spices at the grocery store. I could go through one of those in a sitting because, you know, making my own spice blends and things, I need larger quantities. And it's just not very economical, I find, to buy the little jars, at least with the way that I cook it. It certainly makes sense for somebody else. So these are all of my bags of spices that I have bought online. And I've got them all labeled in English so that I don't have to remember the names every time, even though I think at this point I pretty much do. So those are all kind of a mess. I would like to find a way to get them more organized, but they are actually in these 2 bins in alphabetical order. So whenever I start to run out of something in the kitchen, I pull it from here and restock it. So that's that shelf. And then I have 2 crock pots currently. I managed to find these last summer when we were out vide greniering. And a lot of the French crock pots are quite a bit smaller than US crock pots. So it took me a while to find some American sized ones. And then we have a coffee maker for if we have guests. We have a French press that my husband uses every day otherwise. And then my mandolin, which I use only occasionally. And then just some more overflow appliances down there. So I think eventually I'm thinking about maybe putting all of these bulk spices into, say, quart jars or something so that they're a little neater than they are now. But this is a big step along the way, considering we didn't have any of this not long ago. Okay, so that is my grocery stockpile. Now let me go show you the freezer. Okay, so quick detour back to the kitchen to show you the condiments that I forgot to show you earlier. So this shelf sits right next to the stove, and it holds all of the condiments that we use regularly to prepare meals. So as I mentioned when we were looking at the stockpile, it was quite a feat to round up all of the condiments that I'm used to having for recipes. But we're now, I think, in pretty good shape to make just about any of our go-to meals. So since moving here, we've upgraded our cooking oils to a glass bottle with a spout, which is so much more easy to use when we're cooking. And then these bottles here, if you're not familiar with those, they are misto oil sprayers. So instead of using silicone or other propellants like a store-bought cooking spray would use, these you just pump up to build pressure in the can before you spray them. So I've had those for years. I have one for olive oil and one for a more neutral cooking oil that can handle the heat. And then just the normal things, salt and pepper. Notice Worcestershire is spelled differently than it is in the US, which maybe is a good thing because that's the most impossible word to spell. But I've got all of my different types of vinegars, apple cider vinegar, rice wine vinegar, red wine vinegar, all those types of things, as well as our soy sauces and all of the different Asian sauces that we would use to make different Chinese or Thai dishes. And I do make an exception and keep my, garlic powder and onion powder out on this shelf because I just use it so often. It's easier for me to be able to grab it when we're cooking. So yeah, just wanted to quickly show you that so that you had a complete picture of our pantry. And something I forgot to mention earlier, which you may have already noticed, and that's that our refrigerator does not have a freezer. So it is just a refrigerator. So any of our frozen foods have to go out in the cellar. Okay, before we head into the cellar for me to show you the freezer, I thought I would take a minute and tell you how we used to organize our freezers in the US. And the first thing to point out there is I said freezers plural, because you were about to see what we have here is far from ideal, but it is a starting point. So in the US, we had 3 freezers. We had what I would consider a medium-sized freezer, which stored our meats, which we got on sale, and our fruits and veggies. So a lot of times we would process a large quantity of, say, peppers or onions. We'd chop them all up or cut them into strips and then freeze them in bags so that we had basically created our own convenience foods when we were cooking. So that freezer held stuff like that. It also had things like gallons of blackberries that we had foraged and nuts and any of that type of stuff. We then had a small freezer, which I think of as an apartment-sized freezer. Now that one was just for breads. So we had all of our flours in there just to keep them from going buggy. We had any kind of breads that whether it was store-bought breads or breads that we had made in bulk, as well as doughs and pie crusts. And I'm probably forgetting a few things that were in there. But that's the general idea of what we kept that one for. We had one for meats and fruits and veggies, and we had one for breads. Then we had an upright freezer, and that was really more of our homemade things, the stuff that we made ourselves and had packaged in a way that was just convenient for us. So it was stuff like my homemade broths, dried beans that I had cooked and put into cans and frozen, tomato products that I had made. What else am I forgetting? Pie fillings, all of my homemade jams. I always have preferred to make freezer jams just because of the flavor and the vitamins and things that you get in the frozen. And then it also had stuff like I would buy all of my butter in bulk whenever it was either on sale in the holidays or if I caught it reduced price. So we were at a point where for us, if we were meal planning for the week, once we knew what meals we planned to make, we would start by grocery shopping in our own house, in the freezers, in the stockpile for the foods that we had on hand. And then we would really only then be buying anything that we didn't happen to have. So it was a really great system for us. It allowed us to stay organized and to really know what we had on hand and to utilize things in a reasonable timeline. Now, here, what I'm about to show you is we have one single chest freezer. It's quite small. It is stacked to the gills. I mean, it's packed to the gills. There's no room for anything else. So it's really not something that we're able to keep organized at this point. It's just we know something's in there and we have to put on gloves and dig until we find what we need. So my long-term plan is to add an upright freezer so that I then have room for the things that I don't now. So the broths, the jam, I always made my own pumpkin puree. So that we'll have those things on hand on shelves in a way that's very organized. So once again, when we are planning meals, we can just come out here and shop for what we need. So let me show you what we have now, because maybe it's not an ideal setup, but it's certainly a step in the right direction and better than nothing. Okay, so here is the freezer in our cellar. Now, you'll note that we keep a pair of gloves on top of it, and that is because it is packed so tight that you have to dig for so long, you absolutely need gloves to do it. So we just pretty much keep a pair here now for that purpose. Okay, so when I said it was packed to the gills, totally not kidding. So just imagine how much fun it is when you need to come find something, or how not fun it is when you know the thing you need is at the very, very bottom. So obviously I can't even begin to show you what we keep in here without sorting this out. So let me sort this into some bins and then I can give you an idea of the kinds of foods that we keep frozen. Okay, so I pulled some stuff out of the freezer and organized it into bins so I could show you what sort of things we keep in the freezer. And I'll be honest with you, I am really now wondering how it was even in the freezer, because this is just some of the food. As I'm about to show you, there's more still in here. Okay, so let's run through these. So the refried beans that I showed you, I think that was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. We keep jars of those in the freezer for quick meals. So I've got quite a few of those now. This is all meat, and this is a lot less than we would have kept in the US because I just really don't have room for much more right now. So whenever I find 5% lean ground beef reduced, I will buy it and stick it in the freezer. So that's what that is. Try not to eat a ton of lunch meat. If we do though, I buy it reduced and we keep some of that in the freezer. And then this is a cool product in France. I don't know if there's anything like it in the US, but these are lardons, or bacon bits basically. And these are like 2 packs and they're already, it's real bacon and it's already cut into like bacon bit pieces in little individual pouches. So it's super convenient for recipes. So that's basically that. I don't have any chicken right now because I've not really landed on a good deal yet. Okay, so this is all the sort of stuff that would have been in our bread freezer before. So it's times when I've made this chocolate zucchini bread. You may remember there was a week where I had zucchini in one of my reduced veggie and fruit boxes. So I made chocolate zucchini bread and froze some of the extra. I do make my own pie crust, but I like to have my own pie crust, and some of this is actually what's it called? Puff pastry. So that's what those are. Here's some of my homemade pie crusts I have already pre-made so that I can quickly make a pie. And as I told you, I like to freeze grains like oatmeal before they're stored anywhere else. And then this is all pain au chocolat, so it freezes really well. And sometimes we'll get a reduced price deal and we'll just throw them in the freezer so that we have some on hand if we maybe are busy and don't have time to go to the grocery store. And then I guess the last thing in the breads, these are par-baked baguettes. They're definitely not a good replacement. There's no comparison between this and a fresh baguette. But it's nice to have a couple on hand when you're busy or you have guests and you just need to quickly put something together. Okay, so there's breads. And then this is some of the fruits and veggies, and I'll show you the rest in the freezer in a minute. So, again, with getting those reduced price boxes, I've been freezing mushrooms. They freeze really well. Tomatoes. I like to make my own tomato products, but you don't have to do it right when tomatoes are in season. So you can just freeze whole tomatoes and then process them whenever you have time. And then I've got some frozen celery. Mostly I will just use this in something like broth because it doesn't really freeze as well as some things. So that's what that's for. I'd like to kind of have scraps and things that I keep in the freezer for making broth. The other day I made pimento cheese and the peppers were only available in a large jar. So I minced them up and I froze them in cubes the size that I need for my recipe that I make. So that's that. More mushrooms. As I mentioned, I make all of my own pumpkin puree. I only have 1 jar right now because I just don't have the space to store what I normally would. And that's, if you don't know, you're not supposed to can pumpkin puree. So this is really the safe way to handle that. Okay, I like to make my own pie fillings. So this is apple pie filling, and it's actually been frozen in the pie plate before we put it in the freezer, so it's even a round that will fit right into my pie crust when we want to make one. This is sacred stuff here. Cranberries are incredibly rare in France, and we managed to get some for Thanksgiving and Christmas this year, and I've just got a little bit left over. And then we have a plum tree on the property, and we were really busy when they were in season. And these cling super tight to their pit or their seed, and so I thought if I froze them that they probably would come off the pit really easily when I had time to work with them. So we'll see. And then just some stuff from the grocery store. Mango. I had forgotten I even had. I already showed you those. So that's some of the vegetables. And then this, as you've seen, we pretty much always end up with some bananas in our reduced produce boxes. So initially I had just been freezing them like this, which is what I've always done, just take the peel off and freeze them whole, and that gives you something you can use in smoothies or banana bread or whatever. Lately, I've started going ahead and pureeing them, and these are all 2-cup servings of banana puree. And the reason I did that was because that's the amount that I use in my banana muffins. So that just gives me an easy way to do that. And then the rest of this bin is, so I have made, I guess, a few jam type things. So I made pear chutney earlier this year. I got a big bulk box of pears and made pear chutney. My plan for that was to put it over cream cheese and have it with crackers or tortilla chips. And then last week, as you saw, we made lemon curd, so I've got some of that in this bin. Okay, so that still leaves a few things here. Now I do freeze cheese. If I get a good sale, I'll freeze cheese so that we always have that on hand. And now, because we live in France, that includes fondue cheese. And then, I really don't know how this all fit. Okay, so as I mentioned, I keep stuff scraps for broth. You can use like the greens, the tops of vegetables when after you're cutting stuff for dinner. So that's what a lot of that is. Happily, we have tons of blackberries on the property. I think I would have been sad if we didn't still have blackberries in our lives. So we freeze those in big gallon bags. And our main thing, I make really good blackberry jam, and then we also make blackberry cobbler, which I think we're actually going to do this week. I've got whole peeled chestnuts. I think it's probably the only nut I have on hand at the moment. And then just more veggies. They have really excellent frozen veggies here in France that are already prepared, and they're very affordable. So red peppers, we got more blackberries, and just onions. You can buy chopped carrots here, which I don't think we had the option in our grocery store in the US. Beautiful bags of frozen 3-color peppers. And then, let's see, at the very, very bottom, and I probably will not succeed in unearthing it. Let's see. You can see down there, we have bags, or not bags, we have jars of homemade veggie broth. So my oldest daughter is vegetarian, so I made a bunch of that before she was here for the holidays. So I don't yet have any turkey or chicken broth or any of that in my freezer like I normally would. And then just various ice creams, either store-bought or several tubs of homemade ice cream cake. And then all of the fresh herbs at the grocery store, you can buy them in like the frozen garlic or shallots, coriander, which I guess actually would be cilantro in the US. So, and then I also always keep some ginger in here frozen as well, just so that I can quickly grate what I need for a recipe. So, not our ideal setup, but you can see, like, we've only been here 16 months, and we are definitely restocking the freezer, the fridge, the stockpile, and eventually we'll get another upright freezer to stand next to this, and then I will really be able to get back to making all of our stuff, and we'll get to a point where we can actually have this organized in a way that is not crazy and requiring gloves. While I'm in the cellar, I also want to show you another important piece of our food pantry, and that's all of my canning supplies. So I have a shelf in the cellar, which you can see on the very top here. We have my canner, and then all of these shelves are my canning jars. So whichever ones I'm not currently using. So, and I have them labeled on the shelves by the type of jar so that they're easy to find and just as easy to put away. So it's very rare for there to be a day that I'm not out here grabbing jars for some project or another. And then over here I have some additional jars that are a little more specialized in size, and I've started to kind of get them labeled in bins as well so that they're easy for me to pull. So we've got bigger canisters for projects, and then just beside that I also have all of our stock of laundry detergent. So that is something else that I only buy when I'm able to get it, basically when I'm able to get it 80% off. Okay, while Mr. Huff figures out how to fit all that food back in the freezer, let me show you our toiletries. So we're lucky to have this big cabinet built in underneath the window in the downstairs bathroom. And I use that to store all of our shampoo and conditioner. So this is all shampoo and conditioner that we've managed to get 70% off or better. And then if you noticed earlier, I didn't show you any toilet paper in our stockpile. And that's because we have enough space in each of the bathrooms to store it there. So we don't have any in the stockpile. So that's what you see here, along with any of our open stuff. All right, now let me pop upstairs and show you the rest of our toiletries and how we store those. Okay, so we are in our principal bathroom, and I want to show you how we organize and store the rest of our toiletries. Now, in the US, we had a linen closet upstairs, and I had a big organizer on the back of the door that allowed me to organize and store just about anything we needed toiletry-wise, and it worked great. Now, when we came here, this bathroom really didn't have any built-in storage, and we don't really have a dedicated linen closet either. So we purchased this dresser secondhand at a consignment store, and now this is what I use to store all of our sales price toiletries. So let me show you what we've got. So this drawer is for medications, and we don't take much of anything. We have to be feeling pretty lousy to take something, honestly. But you'll see I do have a stash of American migraine and extra strength headache medicine. Now, this is a 200 tablet bottle or caplet bottle. And as we know in the US, you could easily have even a 500 tablet bottle. It's very easy to get, no problem. Here in France, it's different. All over-the-counter medicine is at the pharmacy. So you can't go buy it at like a Walmart, or you can't buy it at the grocery store. You have to actually go to the pharmacy. And you have to stand in line. And it's truly over-the-counter. You have to get it from the pharmacist. So just to give you an idea, earlier this week, we stopped in and got some sinus headache medicine. And you can see this is 8 gel caps. So you don't have the option of big bottles. They basically sell you enough to get through whatever you're dealing with at that moment. So it's not like you're able to stockpile a bunch of stuff and have it on hand. So we do try to keep up with our American stuff just because it really is nice. If I have a migraine, I don't want to have to go stand in line at the pharmacy. I want to be able to take something right then to deal with it. So anyway, that's that drawer. Now this drawer, you can see I have bins for different things. So this is all the toothpaste that you saw me get 80% off here in recent weeks. And then I've got a stash of toothbrushes. I found a great deal and just loaded up on those. Just sunscreen just stays in here, and an extra thing of hair gel. And then I was able to bring all of my soaps that I hadn't gone through yet in the US with us. And so I've got that I'm still working through. And I've added in some like 80% off French milled soaps that are really nice. And then the extra hair accessories and brushes and things. Okay, the next drawer. So if you were a couponer in the early 2000s, you might have a stash like this too. So there was a point where you could combine a coupon and a sale and get free razors. And so we stocked up when that was an option to stock up. And I don't think I will ever have to buy razors again. And then Mr. Huff had a favorite brand that was discontinued. And I think it was on eBay that he managed to buy like a big case of them one time. So he also has like a lifetime supply of razors. And then you saw the other week where I got all the deodorant 80% off. This is what I use. This is what he uses. So we've got, I think we each have 4 in reserve. And then this drawer at the bottom is just our travel stuff. So that's not really a pantry item. And this, however, is extra supplies to restock our first aid kits. So I think that's pretty much all of our food pantry / grocery stockpiling that we do. So this is something that has saved us a ton of money over the years. Our main reason for stockpiling is that it saves us a lot of money, and it's really convenient to be able to just have what we need on hand, so we don't really run out of stuff. Running out for us means you used up what was in the kitchen and now you go get another one out of the stockpile. So it's just a convenience thing, it's a savings thing, and it's just nice to know you have a reserve of the things that you need. It's definitely a comfort thing to know that if something bad were to happen, if you were to lose a job or whatever, if you were to get sick and not be able to work for a bit, that you've got the things that you need on hand to take care of your family. So hopefully you have enjoyed our tour, and I do want to end today by showing you how to make one of the foods that we make ourselves to keep in our stockpile. So let me take you down and we'll do that. Since I showed you my family's food pantry this week, I thought I would show you one of the foods that we choose to make homemade rather than store-bought. Now last week I showed you that real maple syrup is actually quite affordable here in France. I think I paid $2.48 for this bottle. Now when my kids were little, I remember this being somewhere in the $7 range in the US, and there was just no way that was ever going to fit our grocery budget. So I didn't feel great about the alternative either, which was pancake syrup, because the store-bought version contains high fructose corn syrup and a bunch of other not so great ingredients. So I looked up the label today on one brand just to give you an idea. So it contains high fructose corn syrup, so that's the main ingredient, followed by regular corn syrup, water, salt, cellulose gum, caramel color, natural flavor, and then 3 preservatives that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. So that wasn't something that I wanted to feed my family. And in looking for an alternative, I landed on something that I have stuck to for the last 20 some odd years. And that's making our own pancake syrup using granulated sugar, water, and maple extract. So we're basically just going to make a rich syrup that we're flavoring with maple extract. So this is a really, really easy project. Now, the extract that I use for this, and I'm very brand specific on this one item, is Mapleine. And this is what I've been using for the full 20 some odd years that I've been making our own syrup. Now, the reason I say to use this brand is because I have at times tried to use something else. And what I have found is that other brands of maple extract are not nearly as concentrated in flavor. So you end up having to use a lot more extract, and I don't think you really ever achieve the same level of flavor. So let me show you and I'll mention this box, you can see, makes 24 pints of pancake syrup. So this is gonna last in your pantry for quite a long time. All right, so on the back of the box, you'll see that they actually share 2 recipes. One on the top that says instant syrup, which is more or less the way I'm gonna show you how to make it. This is using granulated sugar to make a rich syrup. Now this is going to be a bit thinner in consistency than what you're used to if you currently buy pancake syrup, but it really still works great, and that's what my family does. This one down here is for this thick syrup recipe. If you really want to achieve a very similar consistency to the store-bought version, then you can make yours using corn syrup. Now, I will make a note that this is corn syrup. This is not high fructose corn syrup. There is a difference in the way your body metabolizes the two. So this is still a better alternative than what you're able to buy at the store. Okay, and if you're curious about the ingredients, since I was just talking about the ingredients in the store-bought version, the maple extract contains water, natural flavorings, caramel color, alcohol, and then some preservatives. So you're probably never going to get away from all of the preservatives, but you are avoiding all of the other things like the corn syrup. Okay, so I have 1 cup of water boiling on the stove. And to that, I'm going to add 2 cups of granulated sugar. So this is the normal 2-to-1 ratio that you use to make any rich syrup. Okay, and then we're going to add to that 1/2 teaspoon of the maple extract. So just a little of this goes a long way. All right, and then I'm just going to stir that together so that the sugar dissolves. Okay, and you see it's a little bit cloudy at the moment, so we're just going to keep stirring until it clears up. And that way we'll know the sugar has really fully dissolved. Okay, see how it's starting to clear up now? Okay, so that is a finished batch of pancake syrup. And here's the batch that we just made. So as I said earlier, you'll make about a pint or a little more if you're doing the sugar version, which is enough to fill both of these bottles. Now, since this is a rich syrup, it will keep in the fridge for several weeks. So just like with the store-bought pancake syrup, you can make a batch and then use it until it's gone and just simply replenish it with a new batch. Now, if you're curious about the cost comparison, I looked up the current prices for granulated sugar and Mapeline, and this costs just 64 cents to make a batch. And by comparison, the cheapest store brand version that I was able to find is at the moment $2.49 a bottle. So it is a cost savings in addition to allowing you to make something that's a little healthier for your family. So if you're interested in making this yourself, I will write up instructions for how we make it, because as I mentioned, it is slightly different than what's on the box. And I will include a link to that in the description below the video. And because I know so many people nowadays are looking for sugar-free products, I'll also include instructions for making a sugar-free version of this pancake syrup.